Alright, everybody, we got plenty of stuff to go through, so let's do this real quick because I'm excited. I'm really trying to control myself. But we just got word that the Amazing Spider-Man, matter of fact, let's not call him the Amazing Spider-Man. As far as I see it, I think the film should be called The Ultimate Spider-Man. And the film is scheduled for July 28th, 2017, which was actually supposed to be Thor Ragnarok, but they pushed the list down. So everything's like a couple months ahead now. But anyway, we're gonna go through the whole not the whole list, but some of it. We're gonna go through the whole list of what's been going on within the series, so we're gonna cover that quickly. As Tobey Maguire, who portrayed Spider-Man in 2002 to 2007, there were a number of heroes and villains who found their way into Spider-Man's heart and then made an opening for him within the final setup of his series. Now, in Spider-Man 1, we know Peter Parker is the nerd of his life and has a very difficult time talking to girls, except for his potential wife and love interest of the entire series, Mary Jane Watson. Now, throughout the entire film series of the Tobey Maguire setup, Mary Jane and Peter develop a relationship a little shorter after Spider-Man 2, due to the fact that Peter rejected her in Spider-Man 1. Now, the main antagonist for Spider-Man 1 was the Green Goblin. In Spider-Man 2, the antagonist was Dr. Octopus. And in Spider-Man 3, there were a total of 3 antagonists, but due to the fact that the relationship between Harry and Peter was sustained due to the fact that his butler, who I cannot remember the name of at the time, had really opened Harry's eyes to the point that Peter did not kill his father, thus making Harry reluctantly forgive his friend, even though he did not know what really happened at the time. So the team up between New Goblin and Spider-Man led to the final fight between Venom and Sandman, although Sandman, a little shortly after the fight and Harry's death, he confirmed that he accidentally killed his Uncle Ben, and then has shown great reluctancy in doing so. Peter then stated that he forgave Sandman, and Sandman turned into a sandstorm and disappeared within the city. And that's the end of the series. Now, originally, we know that there were scripts for Spider-Man's 4, 5, and 6 featuring Tobey Maguire, which would have been awesome. I would have loved every bit of that. But now, although Sam Raimi said he could not cope with the fact that Sony was pushing him to release Spider-Man 4 in 2011, he is said to have dropped from the project, which he did. So in 2009, it was stated that a reboot was in development and was casting Andrew Garfield as to play Spider-Man. Now, the biggest conception of all that is already stated in down the line. Now, instead of Mary Jane Watson, we had Emma Stone play Gwen Stacy, who was the love interest of Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. Now, the antagonist, however, was originally not to plan to be, it was supposed to not be Harry. It was supposed to be Harry, but instead they went with a lizard because they wanted to go to a character that was closer to Peter throughout his, him dealing with the fact that his parents were, no longer among the living. So, the lizard, who is Dr. Connors, as we know, faced off against Peter atop of Oscorp Towers, effectively killing Gwen Stacy's father, who then realized who Peter really was, and then apologized to his daughter for not believing that he was the right choice for her. So, upon the death and the funeral of Captain Stacy, Gwen had approached Peter and asked why he did not go in the funeral. This led to the falling out and then reunion of Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. Now, here are the certain parts of the Amazing Spider-Man film that a lot of you did not notice. Flash Thompson, who we know is now the Agent Venom and is a current member of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the comic books, is actually, who I cannot remember the actor. Good God, I'm sorry about that. But the actor who portrays Flash Thompson has actually been in an interview a little late of last year, said that he would love to appear in the Venom's film, and it's actually stated that they were close to talk. They contacted him and said that he would love to be in the film. So that's a little after the events of Spider-Man 1, The Amazing Spider-Man 1, I mean. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came to fruition, which also featured more than 3 antagonists, actually. The antagonist originally was the original Green Goblin, who later, passed on his technology to his son Harry, who was close friends with Peter at the time. So instead of approaching Peter, Harry approached Peter about, asking Spider-Man to give him his blood. So after a long event, of a slight team up with Gwen Stacy, Electro is killed. Well, supposedly killed, according to some of you. Electro is defeated in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but the time spent between Gwen and Peter was shortly lived due to the fact that upon the fight between Peter and Green Goblin, the clock tower that they were fighting in collapsed and Gwen fell to her death. Peter currently blamed himself. So upon all of that happening, this was the plot line for The Amazing Spider-Man 3, which was stated by Mark Webb stated that Spider-Man 3 is said to pick up after Gwen's death and focuses on Peter's recovery from it. They also stated that Mary Jane would also be a love interest in the film. Now, here's another little plot line between the Spider-Man series from Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield. Notice that there are, if I'm not mistaken, there are all the Sinister Six members in each Spider-Man film. Because there's only been 5 Spider-Man films yet, and in 2017, depending on what villain it is, it'll be 6. So let's look at that. We had the Green Goblin in Spider-Man 1. We had Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, and we had the Spider-Man 3. We had Sandman and Venom. That's 4. Okay, so in Spider-Man 1, The Amazing Spider-Man 1, we had, actually, what was it? Lizard. We had Lizard, so that's 5. And finally, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we had Electro. So that's 6 members of the entire series. But still, we have a lot to work with here, Even though with the cancellation of Amazing Spider-Man's 3 and 4, they already stated that the Venom spinoff, Sinister Six, and the female-centered spinoff are still scheduled, even though that the Sinister Six, planned for its November 11th, 2016 release, has been pushed back slightly. Now, I mean slightly. Just because it's pushed back in 2016 doesn't mean that it won't come out. It probably just means it'll come down maybe a month, maybe a couple months after, maybe early 2017. I'm not sure. I don't really care at this point. Me personally, I'm kind of tired of seeing superheroes. I want to see villains get their swerve on. I want to see the world fear their great abilities, stuff like that. But the film is not, they have not released any information about who's going to appear in the film, who's the love interest, who's the actor, or what's even the plot line of the story. But, oh yeah, and I almost forgot, stupid me, Rhino appeared in the end of Amazing Spider-Man. So that's actually 7 members, but considering that the Sinister Six is actually a revolving team-up, so there's a lot of characters in the series that could be replaced and still appear in a Sinister Six film. Of course, considering Venom has its own spin-off, let's drop Venom and just add Rhino into that. And there you have your Sinister Six film. But more or less to the point, I felt like the entire Spider-Man series was definitely carried over to be one of a long-lasting series. It may not be as long as the X-Men series. It may not have been as short as the Avengers series is right now. But seeing that we have plenty of time to discover what is possible for the next Spider-Man film, my feeling about it is they should go with the comics. Call him Ultimate Spider-Man, not just Spider-Man. They say they're going back to his original time in high school. As we know, Peter got his powers as a teenager and grew up with his powers. But here's the biggest plot line I want to see. We all know Hugh Jackman is probably getting kind of tired of playing Wolverine. So if anything, a little after he does his little Wolverine sequel, let's say this. We all know that Spider-Man and Wolverine are blood brothers in this comic book series. So why not? Let's go with that. Let's put Wolverine in the Spider-Man spinoff. the new Spider-Man film. That way, they'll give enough leverage to put Wolverine and Spider-Man in the Avengers 3, which they already teased that Spider-Man would appear in the new Avengers Infinity War, which is scheduled for 2018, and Part 2 is scheduled for 2019. So I'll give you guys some time to think about that. Feel free to let me know anything you have involving Marvel or DC or just in general. I will give you any type of coverage you need me to.